All right, so I've been watching a couple of videos. The first one was by Hans Rosling, and it was a TED Talk about the magic washing machine. Um, in this video, he talks about when his mother first got a washing machine. He was only 4 years old, and their parents had to save up quite a bit to be able to get this washing machine. And so when they first got it, it was kind of a huge deal. And so they gathered around to watch it when they first were going to use it. And the grandma came over to watch as well. And as they put the clothes in and got ready to start it up, the grandma said, "Oh no, let me push the button. Let me start the machine." And so she pushed it, and it was just like a miracle to her because of how hard they normally would have had to work to be able to wash their clothing. And so she actually sat there and watched the washing machine go because it was such a miracle to her. And so in this talk, he talks about how 2 billion of the world's population, 2 billion people, live on less than $2 a day, and these are people that aren't able to afford washing machines. They're not able to afford the technology that we have that makes our life so much easier. And then he talks about how there's others that are able to live off of $80 a day, and that would be more of the wealthy type of people. And then there's kind of a middle line where there's about 1 billion people that live off about $40 a day, and these are the people that he classifies as the washing machine people that are able to have a washing machine. And anyway, he ended up talking to some students at one time, and he basically asked them, he kind of was talking about, like, shouldn't everybody be able to have the basic need, the basic things like a washing machine, cars, that kind of thing. And they told him that they didn't think that everybody could have something like that. And so he conducted a little experiment. He had everyone raise their hand that didn't have a car, and there were a few that rose their hand and that usually could walk and things like that. But then he had everybody raise their hand that actually had to wash their clothing by hand, that didn't have a washing machine, and nobody raised their hand. And I think that was probably a powerful thing that drove home to the point that that everybody needs that kind of a need, the thing like a washing machine. So he talks about how right now our energy consumption is like around 12 or something like that, and how the rich use about half of that energy, and the poor use very little. And he talks about how eventually the people that are poor are going to move into a little higher class, and everything will move up, and then we're going to be using about double the amount of energy, but the rich will still be rich and using about twice as much of the energy as the poor. The end thing that he did is he said that as his mother was able to use the washing machine, that allowed her to then all of a sudden take her son to the library and read books, and she was able to educate herself and her son, and this allowed them to get out of the poverty cycle and allowed them to have great success and great advances. And so that was kind of a neat video. I liked it because it shows that as people are not basically consuming all of their time just doing basic things like washing clothes, they're able to expand out and take care of other things that can lead to greater purposes. The next video I watched was a video from Sheryl Wedunn, and she talks about women inequality. She says that it's the biggest cause of our time, the biggest problem of our time, of our generation. And she talks about this girl, Dima Zhu, in a remote area of China. Her parents wanted to pull her out of school because they didn't think that it would be worth it for her. But her story was published in the New York Times, and because of generous donations, their school was able to be renovated, and she was able to get a good education, and she was able to move from this vicious cycle to a virtuous cycle, according to what Sheryl Wedunn said. She talked about how in India, basically from birth to one, all of the children are pretty similar, boys and girls, because they just rely off of the milk from their mother. But from 1 to 5, girls die at a 50% higher rate than boys, and this is because they do not have as much access to food, and there's some sort of inequality there that is definitely sad. She talks about two major problems. One of them is this idea of trafficking, she says that 800,000 slaves are trafficked nowadays, and that people can buy a girl slave for a few $100s, which is just crazy to think about. And the other thing she talks about is maternal mortality. And she said that on the other side of the world, that many girls die during childbirth. And she gives us a story about this one girl that went to have a baby in a bush just because she didn't have access to a hospital, and the baby ended up dying, and she ended up getting an infection and a fistula, and she started to stink, and the people actually wanted to just let the hyenas eat her, but she was able to crawl 30 miles to get help, and when they helped her and healed her, they recognized that she had ability to become a nurse, so she became a nurse, and she ended up saving the lives of many people. And she also jumped out of that vicious cycle and into the virtuous cycle, according to Sheryl. And so Sheryl, her end part of this little video, she talks about how individuals can make a difference, and she talks about how we need to reach out and try and help people, and kind of think about, once our needs are met, that we can be happier by trying to help others. And she talks about this aid worker that went to Darfur and saw things that she never should have seen, and then she came back and she just realized how blessed she was to have been born where she was born, and to have the blessings that she has. And so Sheryl's end message to all of us is that we can all make a difference. We can try and reach out and help those that are in need. And so